Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and esteemed board members of the Federal Reserve. My name is Christopher McIntyre, and I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today about the U.S. subprime mortgage crisis. If you'll move to the next slide, I'm first going to give you some background information from an overview I've been adapted from Quaesare in English. In the early 2000s, our Federal Reserve interest rates were at historic lows. In order to compete with this, many mortgage lenders began loaning money to customers that had poor credit scores and lower income. They were able to do this through what is known as an adjustable rate mortgage. The way that the adjustable rate mortgage works is initially it has a very low interest rate, but that interest rate increases on an annual basis. At the same time, many financial institutions started investing in mortgage-backed securities, particularly ones that were subprime in nature and had a lot of these adjustable rate mortgages bundled up inside of them. And when the interest rates started increasing, many of the customers started defaulting on their payments, and the mortgage securities that were attached to them rapidly deteriorated in value. So this left those financial institutions that were holding them unable to generate the cash flow to loan to their customers to create current revenue to cover their current obligations and debts. So if you move to the next slide, I'll now go over the agenda for today. I'm first going to discuss the investing strategies and policies of both JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup Bank. I'm then going to compare and contrast them, and finally, I'll give you the takeaways. If you move to the next slide, we'll first look at the investing strategies and accounting policies of JP Morgan Chase. In their annual 10K report for 2009, they state that they prefer to classify the majority of their non-trading securities as available for sale. The reason for doing this, management sees it as a way to better manage their exposure to interest rate movements. And according to FASB 320-10-35-1, classifying them as available for sale will mean that they'll be carried at the fair value, and any unrealized gains or losses will be recognized through accumulated other comprehensive income. JP Morgan goes on to say that if they did have any held maturity investments, they would be carried at the amortized cost accordingly. However, they have not purchased any new held maturity investments in the past several years. If you move to the next slide, we'll now take a look at Citibank Group. Citibank Group, on the other hand, had, entering 2009, already had a much larger portion of their portfolio classified as held to maturity. Additionally, according to their annual 10K report for 2009, management made the decision to reclassify a large portion of their available for sale securities as held to maturity investments. Why did they do this? Well, they did this because they figured that the expected cash flows far exceeded the current fair value. By reclassifying them to held to maturity, they would be reevaluated at the current fair value, but going forward, they would be amortized. They'd be held at the amortized cost, and any future declines in the fair value wouldn't have to be recognized in the accumulated other comprehensive income unless it was deemed other than temporary. And this is according to FASB's codification 320-10-35-1. This could be seen as Citigroup as an attempt to potentially manage their equity, keep the equity from decreasing with future decreases in the fair value of these securities. Now, if you take a look at the next slide, we can draw some comparisons between JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup Bank. On one hand, JP Morgan Chase, their non-trading investing portfolio was only 0.0047% subprime in 2009. Additionally, less than 1% of it was classified as held to maturity investments. What was the result? They were a lot more liquid because it was available for sale and not held to maturity. And their portfolio was a lot less risky with only 0.0047% subprime. They had an $11.728 billion profit in 2009. Now look at Citigroup Bank. Citigroup Bank had 0.3643% of their non-trading portfolio held as subprime securities. So that's a number that's almost 78 times what it was for JP Morgan. It may not sound like a lot, but it's 78 times more than what it was for JP Morgan. Additionally, they classified almost 20% of these securities as held to maturity investments. This resulted in them being a lot less liquid, a lot more risky, and contributed to them having a $1.6 billion loss in the same year that JP Morgan was able to drive a $11.728 billion profit. Now, if you move to the next slide, Let's sum it up with some takeaways. JP Morgan, through the use of conservative investing strategies and using conservative accounting policies, holding their investments as available for sale rather than held to maturity, was able to successfully navigate the ongoing subprime mortgage crisis of 2007 to 2010. While on the other hand, Citigroup Bank, a lot more aggressive, took on a lot more risk, bought up a lot more of these subprime mortgage-backed securities, was not so successful. They had a $1.6 billion loss. I hope that you can draw some of your own conclusions and you can use some of this information as you go forward and have discussions about what regulations are necessary to prevent a future condition like this from happening again. If you move to the last slide, you can find my references. Thank you very much and have an excellent day.